Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Exploring Sacred. This is Denise Iwaniw Francisco, and I am your show host for this evening, the cruise director, if you will, of tonight's Exploring Sacred show. And I'd like to just take a moment to welcome you all to Sacred Space. Here in my sacred space, the candles have been lit, the incense has been burning, and this evening's incense is actually copal. So clearing the space for all of us to be together and centering the space is always a great, good thing. So I'm set here in my sacred space, and I invite you to be set in yours as well. Tonight we're going to be talking about spiritual fire, the various sorts of spiritual fires, and playing with spiritual fire, respecting spiritual fire, and having integrity, not only with your own spiritual fire, but the spiritual fire that dwells within all living things, seen and unseen. So I'm going to take just a moment. Good evening, Sonia. It's good to see you in the chat room this evening. Welcome. And for those of you that are watching, if you would, hey, good evening, Delgadillo. Anna is in the house. Hello, Marianne. It's good to see you as well. We've got both of the coasts covered, the West Coast and the East Coast. It's good to have you ladies on the show as well. Thank you for sharing the show. Hello, Cindy Lynn. Good to have you. Hey, Sue Shamali. It's good to have you here as well. It's a really good topic, I believe, this evening. And I'm glad that you're here with me. And you know, as you always know, hey, Lady Hawk, the great state of Texas has entered the house. There we are. Good evening, Aaron. Happy to have you here as well. I'm going to take just a moment to share this over to the School of Sacred Studies. So as I'm doing that, I invite you all to take some deep breaths in and settle comfortably. If you haven't had a chance to light a candle, this would be a good time to do that. And my boys are beginning to settle in. Gabriel James is laying right down here by me. All right. Good, good, good. All right. Thank you for that, Marianne. I appreciate that sharing of the show. It helps people until people become acquainted with going to the Exploring Sacred page on Facebook. I appreciate that because people do write to me and say, hey, I found it because Marianne shared it, or Jocelyn or Jacqueline or Aaron shared it, or I found your book because Anna shared it. On Instagram and Facebook. So thank you all for that. That means a lot to me. Hey, Katie Battle. Good to have you here. Oh, Jacqueline, you are in the house. And my friend Janice Francisco, who also happens to be my mother-in-law. How nice is it when you get to have a mother-in-law who is actually your friend long before you even knew who is now currently my husband. Todd and I have known each other fewer years than his mother and I have known one another. So that's a great, good thing. She's a wonderful friend and a great mother-in-law to have. So this evening we're talking about spiritual fire, and it's a conversation, you know that. So when we have the shows with one another, it's important for you to know that you can ask questions, that you can weigh in and share your thoughts about things that we're talking about. I invite you to do that. And to share with one another. I think that that's very important to build community and to help us all learn. It's amazing what we can all learn when we are sharing thoughts and ideas about all things, and particularly things that have to do with the sacred, or what I consider to be sacred, and perhaps you do too. Earlier this week, that would be yesterday, me and one of my elder sisters, Del Marie, did a show. It was her show, Walk a Good Life. Wachoni Washte Mane Pe, Walk a Good Life. And we did a show about the importance of keeping sacred ceremony sacred in coming to understand sacred ceremony and having respect for sacred ceremony and for sacred objects, etc., because there are a lot of people, lately she has been made aware that there are a lot of people who have visited out west to the reservation and have taken those teachings upon themselves in other parts of the world. And when she first told me that, she said, you know, Denise, I think I'd like to do a show about that because there are people who experience a certain form of spirituality, whether it's the Lakota form of spirituality and religion, and then having 5 days or 5 minutes of awareness about a certain religion or a spiritual path. They feel free perhaps to take it to other places around the world and teach it as they understand it. And I thought, well, my gosh, that's a wonderful idea. Todd's just sitting down. So if you're wondering who's the shadow that just came into the photo, it's Todd waving at everybody. There you go. So it started a conversation between she and I about talking about spiritual fire and talking about integrity. Well, when you look up the words spiritual fire, there are a lot of things that come up with regard to spiritual fire. And oftentimes when you first look up those words spiritual fires, what you will see are references to the soul, to the spirit, to the divine spark that lives within each and every one of us. And I believe in each and every living thing, both seen and unseen. There's a fire. There's a fire that kindles our body, our spirit. I believe it's the spirit and the soul working together that causes this magnificent friction of fire. And I believe that that same friction of fire between spirit and soul and animation exists in all living things, but not only those things that we can see, but also those things that sometimes our physical eyes cannot see. But the ajna, the third eye, the sixth sense, allows us to see. What our clairs allow us to feel, to sense, to smell, to taste, to hear. There are so many ways, I believe, that we connect with spiritual fire. Whether it is the fire of the soul, of one another, or the spirit of something that is unseen to the physical eye, and all things that are seen to the physical eye. What can get tricky is when we begin to want to learn with and interact with those things that aren't seen by the physical eye. And we're going to talk about that for a bit this evening. And, oh, my necklace. Yes, my necklace is a Susan Myers piece. Yeah. Sharon Blake, if you happen to be watching, this was created by your dear friend, Susan, down there in the beautiful state of Indiana. And I purchased it from her husband after she passed on. Yeah, it's a lovely piece. And when I wear it, Susan was a clairvoyant as well. She had the ability to see beyond the veil. And she made these pieces when she was in moments of what some might call ecstatic union, of spiritual fire, in fact. And so she would begin to create jewelry pieces, and she would paint these magnificent oil paintings of the angels that she could see with her spiritual eye. So I have several of her pieces, and oftentimes I wear them on Wednesday evening. Some of the beaded pieces that you see me wear were also created by Susan. So I have her spirit with me. I never met her in the physical. I've met her through her creativity. So spiritual fire. A lot of times people will say to me, well, Denise, you know, what do you think about such things as the Ouija board? What do you think about such things as table tipping? What do you think about things that have to do with the unseen world? And, you know, quite frankly, I have no problem with a Ouija board. I have no problem with table tipping or any of those other sorts of things when they're done by people or executed by people who have been trained or who are fully aware of what they are attracting in the non-physical world. Would I buy an 8-year-old a Ouija board and give it to them for a birthday gift at a birthday party? The answer to that is no. And for those of you that are watching this show tonight, maybe you are one of those young people who had a Ouija board, and probably one of two things usually happens. Either it was just kind of something that was neither here nor there and really nothing happened, or you had an experience that was so frightening that you've never forgotten it. I've met people on both sides of the scale, but the potential for tapping into the unseen world with any sorts of those games or tools is very, very, very real. It's very real. What the ancients in the mystery schools, and the mystery school teachers, the philosophers that studied spiritual pathways understood is primarily at the base of all teachings is this: the non-physical world and the physical world are very, very real, whether or not you can see it, whether or not those around you can see it. When somebody says to me, well, Denise, I just don't know about that. The fact that you can see things that I can't see, I don't know about that. I don't know how I feel about that. Well, and I understand when people make those comments because, quite frankly, I don't know what to think about being a surgeon. I don't know what to think about opening up somebody's body to remove a piece or a part or to put a part in. I don't know about that. It's not that I don't trust it. I simply don't know about that. And I have to trust that the surgeon and the entire medical team do know what they're talking about. They do know what they're doing. In fact, today here at the house for an hour, as many of you know, my daughter Elise is now in nursing school. She's gone through all the college curriculum for pre-nursing, and now she's in the nursing school. Well, as she's going through her checkoffs, one of the things that she has to be able to do is to make a bed, a hospital bed, with and without a patient in it. Today, I was a patient for part of the time. I trust that when I go to the hospital, the nurses, the medical assistants, the anesthesiologist, the surgeon, they're all trained. I trust that. I would also hope and trust that if I am going to a spiritual gathering, if I am going to a class or a workshop or a religious community event of any sort, that those that are holding and running those events are also trained and hopefully know what they're doing. I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. The same is true if I am going to a metaphysical event, an event that is not necessarily religious or scientific, but is spiritual in nature. I'm going to take a little look here. Hi, Judy. She's saying, I never touched a Ouija board. But as young teenagers, we did do seances, which were scary enough, even though nothing ever really happened. Thank the Creator, nothing ever really happened. Oh yeah, I've heard about those things. Isn't that funny? I grew up being able to see spirit, and I wouldn't have thought in a million years to do a seance because it would have scared me. Because I knew, even as a young child, that the spirit world was very, very real. And so the thought of actually conjuring up or inviting in spirit as a teenager, no thank you. I went to see The Exorcist with Kelly Spencer, and that set me on my heels for a very long time. It scared the bejeebers out of me. That is for sure. Cindy Lynn is saying, hell no. That's right. So whether we're going to see a surgeon or we're going to a religious ceremony or maybe a shamanic ceremony or a spiritual ceremony, we are hoping and we are trusting that whoever it is that is leading it knows what they are doing. But what about those times when we want to experience communing with spirit? What about those times that we would like to interact with spirit being facilitated by a teacher or somebody that is supposed to be trained? Well, first and foremost, I always say to people, if you're going to go to a class or a workshop, no spiritual teacher, no teacher at all, I don't believe anyway, should ever hesitate in answering a couple of questions. Where did you learn? Who trained you? And, where are you going to take me? What are we going to do? Those are all valid questions. No different than, are you sure that when I go into surgery, you're going to remove my gallbladder and not my ovaries? How are we going to make sure that that's not going to happen? There are practicalities in the non-physical world, just as there are in the physical world. So asking a teacher, where are we going? What are you going to teach me? And what qualifies you to teach me? Those are all perfectly good questions. And if a teacher says to you or gets in a situation where you feel as though you've offended them, I would perhaps say to you, find another teacher. Find another teacher. Yeah. I remember hearing about that story. Nicole Werner is saying Nicole is Kelly's daughter. Yes, I mean, when we were 12 years old, Kelly, who was Lutheran, me being Catholic, Kelly invited me to go see The Exorcist, her and her mom, Mrs. Holt, Nicole's grandma. And so there the three of us went. I was scared to death because nowhere in The Exorcist was there anyone other than a Catholic who was being, possessed by a demon at that time. So it was all about Catholics in that show. I was Catholic, so I thought, oh my goodness, my imagination went wild. And it did then spur a few years later a question to my parish priest, Father Cussler, who unbeknownst to me at the time was an ordained exorcist. And you've heard me tell the story about my confirmation evening when I mustered up the courage to ask Father Cussler why it was that I was able to see people who are supposed to be dead. And why is it, Father, that I can see spirit? And Father, why is it that I can see things I'm pretty sure have never occupied a physical body? And Father, why can I see angels? I think these are angels. And he was so gentle with me, which really wasn't like him, frankly. But he could see most likely the anguish and the anxiety on my 15-year-old face. And he said to me, Catherine Therese, my confirmation name, one day you're going to come to understand the gifts of the Spirit. And I want you to know that not all spirit is good, kind, and loving. Not all spirit comes from the realms of light. And one day you're going to understand that. But for now, try to be a teenager. Well, as I've said before, I had already had glimpses into what Father was talking about. And it wasn't until I was 30 and living here near Grand Rapids, Michigan, that I met my spiritual director and really set about my journey. And one of the things, it was interesting, Charmaine said to me, hey, Charmaine, if you happen to be watching, she said to me something very interesting, and clearly I've never forgotten it because I'm no longer 30. She said to me, Denise, we're talking about the gifts of the Spirit, and we're talking about the unseen world. How do you intend to use your gifts? I said, well, Charmaine, what do you mean by that? And she said, are you going to use your gifts and talents on behalf of the light? Hi, Betty Davis. It's good to see you, Betty. Are you going to use your gifts and talents on behalf of the light, or are you going to use your gifts and talents on behalf of the darkness? I said, well, Charmaine, why are you even asking me that question? She said, because I want to hear you say out loud what you intend to do with the gifts that you've been given. And so I looked at her and I said, well, Charmaine, I intend to work on behalf of the light. I'm going to work on behalf of the light. Why would I do anything other than that? And she looked at me and she said, well, frankly, Denise, not everyone chooses to use their gifts and talents on behalf of the light. And that doesn't just mean people with spiritual gifts and talents. There are people in the business world, in the medical world, in the domestic world that don't use their gifts and talents on behalf of the light. And as your spiritual director, I just needed to hear you declare that, to say that right out loud. And so I did. And so I did. And many years later, fast forward to being on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Geez, this would have been 2006. And sitting in Inipi, in Purification Lodge, most people call that the Sweat Lodge. And when that particular lodge was done, I had been in with a group of people that were mostly holy men and holy women. And afterwards, having the conversation with my teacher at the time about, why am I here? Why am I doing this work? How did I even get here? I'm not a full-blooded Lakota woman. Here I am. At best, I'm a half-breed that's lived her whole life in the white world, in the Wasishu world. What am I doing here? And I remember him shaking his finger at me. And he said, don't ever say that again. Your heart is really, really red. And we know that you're going to do good work. And so you're going to be a pipe carrier. And I said, no, I'm not. No, that's way too much responsibility. I don't think so. I'm not really sure how all of this happened. It happened for a reason. And he said, it did happen for a reason. And there's a lot of responsibility that comes with carrying that Chanupa Wakianto, Blue Thunder Woman. There's a lot of responsibility. And the Wakian, those thunder beings, are going to have an eye on you every single day to make sure that you're walking in a good way with that Chanupa. And if you don't walk in a good way with that Chanupa, those thunder spirits will take that Chanupa right away from you. They will take it right away from you. And I remember sitting in that, it was a very, very dark Inipi. And I had flashbacks to conversations with Sister Irene and Sister Andrea about the way that we use our gifts. And I remember Sister Irene saying, if we're not walking on a path of light with our gifts, sometimes Creator will take those gifts away as a means of making sure that you don't hurt other people or yourself. Sitting in Inipi thinking about a conversation I had had with a Catholic nun, a very dear friend of mine, a mentor of mine, and thinking about how both of those traditions, which are very, very different in some ways, the core basis of the religion and the spirituality is the golden rule. It is the golden rule. Said in two different ways in two different languages. And I know that around the world it's said in many different languages in many different ways. But when you're walking with spiritual fire and you're working with spiritual fire and the fire of spirit, there's always an accountability and integrity. Whether you are teaching it, whether you are utilizing it for yourself personally, there's always responsibility and accountability. And that doesn't mean that we can't have joy. It's not all about piety and being sober and somber, but it's about integrity, accountability, being respectful. Because people can be hurt, not only ourselves, but those around us, if they are not ready or prepared. And I see I have a question from Delgadillo. My spirit cannot do that kind of scary because something that is not nice or of this world attaches itself to me. And I learned that at school when the teacher put that move. Oh my goodness, yes. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. I'm going to go there for a minute. As long as we're talking about playing with spiritual fire and movies. I'll tell you, watching that movie at 12 years old, I still cannot listen to the theme song. You can ask Todd, he's sitting over here listening to me. If I even hear a fraction of a minute of those keys playing the theme song for The Exorcist, I have got to change that channel. I can't be with that. Imagine what that's like then for very young children whose parents or supervisors or those in charge of them and their well-being are not paying attention to what their children are watching, not only on all of the various digital forms. I mean, you can get Netflix now, you can stream anything on Hulu, on your iPad, your smartphone, your tablet, all of those things. The energy of a horror movie, just the energy of a horror movie, I can feel myself ramping up internally when something like that comes on in my house. And for heaven's sakes, I see these things as part of my existence. It's part of my walk in life, is to see the good, the bad, the ugly, the exquisite. It's part of what I see. But to bring it in addition into my home with gratuitous violence, gratuitous, grotesque, whatever, it ramps me up. It begins an energy. Let's think about this. When we pray, when we are in prayer, contemplation, yoga posture, out in nature, there's an alchemy that happens within us. Could be peacefulness, restoration, calmness, healing that's going on. Prayer begins inside of us first, whether we're reading it and taking it in or reading it and speaking it. There's an alchemy. And so the prayer or the contemplation, whatever it is, the sacred song is dwelling within us, and then it comes through us. Make me an instrument of your peace, right? When we invite externally a scary movie, a movie about ghosts, ghost busting, all of those sorts of things, there is a reaction inside of us. If we as adults become anxious and wary and frightened by a movie, imagine what that must feel like to a child. I have had experiences with beautiful young people who have been brought to me by their parents. One young woman in particular who I just dearly love. Her mother brought her to see me because at the ripe old age of 8 or 9 years old, she spent the night at a friend's house. It was a birthday party, a slumber party, right? We all do slumber parties. I hosted slumber parties for my daughter. I had slumber parties. This young woman who's very, very sensitive went to a slumber party, and together they all watched one of those horror movies that these days are so full of gratuitous bloodletting and all of those sorts of things. She became so frightened, she called her mom and said, "Mom, can you come get me?" She was so frightened, she was sick to her stomach. I gave her credit for reaching out to her mom. That took a lot of courage. It took a lot of courage for that young girl to say to her friends, "I can't be here anymore," peer pressure being what it is. "I don't feel good. I'm scared. I need to call my mom." And so mom, a few weeks later, brought her to see me. Mom is a highly educated woman. She works in education. And the mother looked at me and she said, "I went and I picked her up and I brought her home and I tried to calm her down. But Denise, the energy in our home has never been the same. It isn't the same. There are knocking sounds, there's clattering sounds going on, noises going on, and frankly, my daughter is not the same. Everybody in the household knows something is not right, and we think it happened the night of the slumber party." What happened, Denise? What happened? So I let mom sit in the room for a few moments while her daughter spoke to me and described to me in great detail what she saw in the movie. And then her daughter said, Mom, can I talk to Denise alone now? And Mom said, well, of course, you can talk to Denise alone. And so there we were. And she said to me, Denise, I felt something inside of me get really, really sick when I was watching that. And she said, now in my own bedroom, I don't feel right in my own bedroom. I don't feel like I'm alone. Denise, I feel like I brought something home with me and I can't really explain it, but everyone else can feel it too. What do you think that is, Denise? I said, well, describe it to me. And she described in great detail what some might call a shadow figure, a shadow being. She said, I feel like it's in the pipes and it makes the pipes rattle. It makes the ceiling rattle. It makes the windows rattle. Denise, is that even possible? And I said, it is possible. But you know what? Here's the good news. Your light is far more powerful than anything that you brought home from the slumber party. And I'm going to teach you how to use it. And so I sat with her and we did an exercise together where I had her connect with her love light, her spiritual fire, right, kind of right here in the high heart area where my beautiful Susan Meyer piece is. I had her connect with that. I had her feel it within herself. I said, can you feel it? Can you visualize it? She said, I can. I said, okay, I want you to breathe into that. I want you to fan that fire that's within you, that brilliant light within you. I want you to breathe right into it. And I want you to see your inner spiritual fire grow. And I want you to describe it to me as it's growing. And she did. It was magnificent. So I said to her, so let's utilize this magnificent fire, this light within you. Well, Denise, how are we going to do that? I said, I want you to visualize all of this light emanating from your body. I want you to visualize light filling all of the places, every nook, every cranny in your home, under your bed, around your bed, through your pipes, into the water, all of it. And I will sit here for as long as it takes you to do that. And this should be fun for you. Make it fun. And she visualized, and in great detail, she told me about the light going into the pipes, the light going into the ceiling, the light going under her bed and into her closet, surrounding her clothes and out into her yard. And finally she said, okay, Denise, I'm done. And she had a big old smile on her face. In fact, I have a gift here that I keep on my bookshelf from her. It's a stone that she later gave me. And I keep it here to remind me of the importance of spirit and our young people and teaching them about the power of light. Well, when she was done, she said, okay, I'm done. And I looked at her. I said, well, you have a big old smile on your face. And she said, I think I did something really good. I said, I know you did. She said, Denise, I feel really good. I said, wonderful. Can we call my mom in now? And so I called my friend in. Mom came in, sat down, and she looked at her daughter and said, well, it's nice to see a smile back on your face. And she said, Mom, I just learned something from Denise that I'm never going to forget. And her mom looked at her and said, honey, what is it that you learned? And she said, Miss Denise just taught me about the power of my love. Makes me emotional just saying it. Denise just taught me about the power of my love. She didn't say the power of my light. She said the power of my love. Well, they went home and she did her work. The power of her love worked. They've not had any more rattling or visits by shadow figures. The power of her love, right here, the inside job. It reminds me of Francis of Assisi, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. But how did that happen? Likes attract. Likes attract. We know that birds of a feather flock together. So I guess we're all birds of a feather, you and me. We're all birds of a feather. And the same thing goes in the non-physical realm, which is the purpose of the show tonight. The power of our love, I like that phrase, attracts more love and more love light. The power of darkness attracts more darkness and the power of darkness. Ignorance, we all know this, don't we? The power of ignorance attracts more ignorance. I mean, there are people who have whole rallies around ignorance. That's a whole other show, isn't it? Good boundaries in our physical life are very important. If we don't have healthy boundaries with people, situations, thoughts, what we bring into our body, then our whole physical life can fall into chaos, sometimes into absolute ruin. If we don't have good boundaries in our spiritual life, in our religious life, those are two different things, in my mind anyway, we can have absolute chaos and sometimes ruin. The fires of spirit, the fire of spirit within that young girl is so precious. It's precious within each of us. She was scared. In that moment of being frightened, this goes for any of your children, including the video games that they are playing. And sometimes people just hate it when I say that. Watch what video games your kids are playing. Because if they are continuously playing Warcraft, and they are ensconced in the energy of warfare, in their physical world, in their aura, guess what they're going to attract from the non-physical realm? And this doesn't mean that they can only play, flower Legos. I'm not saying that. It's all about balance, being in balance, but being mindful that even young children attract spiritually. If they are always in fear mode from watching horror movies all the time, that fear is in their aura. And guess what? There are bullies on the school playground, at school, who know which of the kids are timid and fearful. The same is true on the spiritual playground. If you or your child are always in the mode of fear, there are those on the other side who will take advantage of your fear. They will take advantage of your ignorance. They will take advantage of your ego and your naivety. It's all about being in balance. So, Delgadillo, I am so happy that you brought that up because it's very, very real. Birds of a feather flock together not only in the physical realm, but also in the spiritual realm. Also in the spiritual realm. Playing with fire, people get burned. And I have been physically burned. I still suffer, not like I used to, because I've got a really great kinesiology chiropractor who's been helping me. I now put chlorophyll cream all over the bottoms of my feet. But I learned a very valuable lesson years ago from going to a fire walk that was conducted by a shaman who had no business conducting a fire walk. And although I made it across the fire and my friend Dr. Bob made it across the fire, and we kind of, marveled at the fact that, wow, that was really quite something. The poor woman who came after us, who had diabetes and polio and was walking through the fiery ashes with a cane, did not make it through. And the ceremony fell. That's a whole other long story. But in helping her to heal, because she was leaving her body, I got the shout, Dana, come over here, please. She's dying. Come over here, please. And so I did what I had been taught to do to keep her spirit in her body. And in doing so, my own feet became on fire. And so I had 2nd and 3rd degree burns over the bottoms of both of my feet and wore bandages for nearly a year. Some of you remember those days with me. I learned a very valuable lesson. I called my teacher, Joaquin, on the reservation just after that happened. I watched the bottoms of this woman's feet fall off. The shaman performing the ceremony, his reaction to all of it was, well, they all signed a waiver. They're all adults. They're responsible for coming here. It's not on us. They decided to do that. I was horrified by that as this woman's bottoms of her feet were falling off. So I made a phone call because I was in my own excruciating pain right now. And before I could even tell him, there he's out on Pine Ridge Reservation, I'm in Michigan, he said to me, your feet are burning because you took the fire for her. That man had no business practicing that ceremony, Blue Thunder Woman. He let the ceremony fall because of his ego. He told that woman he could heal her polio and her diabetes. He led her to believe she could be healed at his ceremony. I said, well, she's being rushed right now to a burn center, Joaquin. He said, I never want to hear that you've done any more ceremonies with him. And so I learned a very valuable lesson myself that evening about speaking up when I need to speak up and not just trusting that somebody who says they're a shaman has been trained to be a shaman. I think we all owe ourselves that. And we owe ourselves that own state of grace when we are beginning to learn. When we are beginning to learn. So in the mornings when I get up and I feel as though I'm standing on a couple of, well, just a mess, a hot mess in my feet, it always brings me back to what we're talking about tonight, literally playing with spiritual fire. Being responsible for the fire that we're playing with. And by fire, I mean spirit. Spirits, ceremonies, rituals, teachers, healers. Just because somebody hangs a shingle on their door and says, I'm a healer, you might want to double check that and find out where they learned how to heal, right? It's just, honestly, it's all common sense, isn't it? All right, let me have a little... Wow, had no idea. Yep. Aw, Judy. You're a big, aw. Well, you are precious, Judy. There is no doubt about that. Oh, Sharon, you are on. Yes, this is your best friend's piece. Yes, this is a Susan Meyer piece, and I wish I would have met her. I feel like I have a connection to her, and I'm glad that you're here on the show and you can see me wearing your best friend's piece. That makes me very happy, very, very happy. Well, yes, Judy, you're a beautiful person. You're a beautiful person. I love doing these shows because sometimes when we get together, we begin having a conversation about things that maybe we can't have at work. Maybe we can't have at the dinner table. Maybe we're wondering why our child, our niece, our nephew, our grandchild is acting differently. One of the things, a lot of you see some of the postings that I've done lately with my friend Marianne Malika from beautiful Florida, Smyrna Beach. Piece of the Beach is who we know her by, partially on Facebook. The ocean is a beautiful place to go and cleanse, to relieve your aura. I had clients up until like 7:35 this evening, literally 7:35. And I went running downstairs and I quickly bathed. I bathed off all of the energy of my clients and my readings today Why? Because when I'm sitting here with you energetically, I don't want that in my aura. I don't want my experience to become your experience with my clients. So I said to Todd, it's going to be a 5-minute bath. I'm going to be in and out, and then I'm upstairs. And he said, okay. And off I went. Because even through the radio, I mean, think about Orson Welles, right? The War of the Worlds and all the pandemonium that was struck by that Orson Welles radio show decades ago. It began a moment of chaos in people's lives, absolute chaos. The same thing is true when, in these days, when we have movies, game, whatever it happens to be. You get the picture. Because our light exudes as it does. I know, I love the ocean. I'm an ocean girl. And having lived on the island of Oahu as a very young girl for a few years, I have to visit the ocean. I need to be near the ocean. Being landlocked is very difficult for me. The ocean is so cleansing. The salt water, the air. It's a wonderful way to take off from us our mental, emotional, spiritual burdens. For me, it was the bathtub with a little bit of lavender oil to take all of that off so that I can rest, so that I can be in a good space with all of you in this way. It's really important that when we are playing with spiritual, and sometimes it is very playful, sometimes it's so joyful, ecstatic union with spiritual light. It's glorious, and we revel in that. And at other times, it can be testing of us. It can make us anxious. It can make us sad. If I'm doing a day long of sessions with parents who have lost their children, by the end of my day, say 4 or 5 hours of doing back-to-back sessions with parents whose children have crossed over, their sadness is residing in my aura. And so I very respectfully clear that off of myself. And in doing so, I bless them at the same time. And I would never then think of going directly into sacred ceremony or any of that without smudging myself, without clearing my energy. If I had the ocean in my backyard, I'd be swimming in it. Because we also don't, if you are a spiritual practitioner, we don't want to bring with us our experiences, if they are heavy, burdensome, sad, full of anguish. Well, for those of you who watched, here's an example of what I'm talking about. Being responsible and having integrity. Yesterday, Del Marie and I were talking about Heoka, which is the Western door medicine way. If you did not watch that show, I just invite you to watch it. It's very poignant on a lot of levels. Well, she told me that she was a little hesitant to talk about that subject because it's very, very deep. Very, very deep. And when we got on the show yesterday, you might notice that at the very beginning of the show, all of a sudden, the picture of me becomes fractured, fractalized, whatever that word is. There I am, like this, and then I come back together. And so I knew, well, here we go. You'll notice, because we were talking about that spirit, that form of spirit, you'll see that I was burning sage as we were doing the show together. We were burning sage. I was burning sage. You can see it. Unless you thought I was smoking and I had an ashtray. It wasn't an ashtray. I was burning sage. Keeping the room clear, keeping the room balanced. No different than before doing this show over on my side altar. I had copal burning to prepare to talk about this subject. It's all about being responsible and respectful of the fact that all of you are going to be spending energetic time with me. My friend Darlene has this great saying. She says, don't be who you're not, and don't say what you don't know. Don't be who you're not, and don't say what you don't know. Keeps you out of a lot of trouble. It's also why, when playing with spiritual fire or walking with spirit, exercising our gifts of spirit, if somebody that I am counseling or teaching falls out of my realm of expertise, they're out of my wheelhouse, I always have on-hand references of other teachers, counselors, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, doctors, financial advisors, all of those, eHarmony, all of those kinds of things. If it falls out of my area of expertise or where I'm comfortable, feeling that I can have integrity in it, I don't go there. And I'm not going to advise anyone on their finances other than the practicality of, if you spend more than you bring in, you've got a problem. I'm going to advise that they see a financial advisor. I'm not going to perform a bar mitzvah. Why? I am not a rabbi. Therefore, I am not going to perform a bar mitzvah. No, I'm not going to do a liver transplant. I'm not a doctor. Will I help you connect with those that you love who have already gone home? I will try my darndest to do that. Will I help to teach you about the reality of the physical and non-physical world? I'll do my best to do that as well. Am I going to teach you how to table tip? Nope, because I don't know how to do that. Am I going to give a gift of a Ouija board to an 8-year-old or an 88-year-old who isn't trained or doesn't even have the beginning inkling of the fact that when you call spirit, spirit says, oh, is somebody ringing? Calling Dr. Bombay comes, or somebody pretending to be Dr. Bombay comes along. Very, very real. And it's okay to say, I don't know. I don't know, but I think I know somebody who can help you. That's a beautiful way of being, I think. Rob is saying, I still hate horror movies, but growing up, it was always porn. Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Yep. It all attracts in our aura. Every little bit of it. It all attracts. Anna's laughing about that. A lot of times when people come to me and they have what I call a spiritual attachment, they have attracted something. I'll just be perfectly honest with everybody. When you walk into a tavern, a pub, any of those kind of places, a haunted house, for those of you that are paranormal investigators, either professional paranormal investigators or wannabe professional paranormal investigators or weekend investigators, please do understand that whether you're walking into a haunted house, Gettysburg battlefield, a hospital, a morgue, funeral homes, you are not there only with the people that are physically present. You are not only there with people who are physically present. If you are a police officer, a first responder, an EMT, a nurse, and you are around trauma, crime scenes, if you are a crime scene investigator, you are not there just alone with perhaps a deceased body fluids, leftovers. You are there with the trauma, the spirit of trauma, the spirit of crime, the spirit of murder. You are not alone. Spirit is where we are. And depending on where we are, determines the kind of spirit that may be there with us. Think about funeral homes. Think about funeral homes. Not that we want to really think too much about funeral homes, but When we walk into a funeral home, we're there with people who are grieving, but we're also there with the spirit of those people who were there before us grieving. And we can't necessarily avoid going to a funeral home. No, let's be prepared to walk into those spiritual fires, those emotional fires, those mental fires, the fires and the spirits of grief. Prepare yourself. Don't just pop in a mint and sign the guest book and go on in. No, take a moment. Take a moment to breathe. Take a moment to invite your guardian angel, your ally, Jesus, Buddha, whomever represents the light to you in the non-physical world, your higher self, your soul self. Please come with me into this funeral. Please come with me. Help to protect my energy. Help to guard me from the ghosts of those who have already been here and maybe are earthbound. Right? We don't necessarily think about that. And so what do we do after we go to the funeral home? After we've been to a crime scene? After we've been on a paranormal investigation? What do we do about that? Well, for myself, I always bless those places. Heck, I bless when I go by a car accident. Blessings, angels of light, healing, yada, yada, yada. Thank you for being present at that scene and with those seen and unseen who were involved in that accident. Every time, absolutely every time. After I leave a hospital, same thing. After I go to clear somebody's home, same thing. If somebody leaves my home from a session, angels of light and well-being, thank you for being with them. When I hang up the phone with a phone client, and then at the end of my evening, sometimes, we all have very long days. And if you don't have the opportunity to go into the shower, you don't have an opportunity to have a nice lavender bubble bath, at the very least, before you go to sleep at night, invite your guardian angels, invite the light. I invite the presence of divine light within me and around me to remove from me and place back into the light the trauma, the sadness, the grief that I saw today. For those of you that are social workers, those of you that are teachers, you're not just there with your clients and your students. You are with their trauma, their drama, their grief, their experiences, and the spirits attached to those things. Be mindful of that. Bless them at the very least. Invite your angels to be present. This is why more and more these days, I have clients who are coming to me who are psychiatrists. Lately, I have been invited into the arena of human trafficking, and more with cold cases. And whether I'm meeting with a cold case detective or a detective working in human trafficking, one of the very first things that I talk to them about is their own self-care. And oftentimes cold case detectives or undercover detectives working in the human trafficking world don't necessarily talk to their fellow detectives about nurturing their aura or their spiritual body. I do that with them because they are playing with spiritual fire. They're playing with the fire of grief, of sex trafficking, of crimes against humanity, against all living things. They're in it. They're walking in it. Doesn't matter how high your boots are, energetically, spiritually, as sensitive beings. You see what I'm saying? Okay, Tracy is saying, as a home health, okay, oh yes, home health. As a home health client okay, yes, so Tracy works in home health care. Some of her clients, oh, little sweethearts, there she is with them. She's there with their illness, with their grief, and maybe sometimes their fear of passing, their fear of aging. She invites her angels to be present. She probably invites their angels to be present. Marianne, who is a social worker, says that she also carries the appropriate crystals in her pocket. There are so many ways we can educate ourselves about not only taking care of our physicality, but our spiritual being as well. Setting good, healthy boundaries in both places. This coming August 18th, Tracy and Mervyn Kelly will be here at the School of Sacred Studies to teach a class in utilizing stones and crystals as an ally, as an aid in this way. There are so many ways. I would not hesitate to have them teach here. Why? They've done their work. They do their work. They are educated. They are balanced between heaven and earth. And I trust that anyone who comes through the School of Sacred Study doors will be in good hands in learning about crystals and stones, which are very much alive. I happen to believe that everything that the Creator creates is alive. Everything. Who is your teacher? What are you inviting into your home? Once you've inadvertently invited it in, because maybe you've not been diligent about making sure that good and healthy things are going on in your home, what do you do about that? Well, you do a cleansing, you do a clearing. You start all over again. I had a woman recently who came to me that had a psychic party in her house. A psychic party. I said, explain to me a psychic party. Was it a party of psychics that came to hang out, or what exactly was it? She said, no, we invited this woman who says she's a psychic. And she came into our house. I said, oh, so she did a gallery inside your home. She did readings for everybody in a group. I said, oh, fun. Did you know her? No. And I could tell by the look on her face, not only did she not know her, she probably was never going to invite her back either. I said, well, so you invited this woman that you don't know into your home. You invited friends to have readings. And she said, oh my God, Denise, she scared the crap out of half of us, telling us about things that were going to happen to us. I said, oh, okay. And she said, the worst part of it, there's something going on in my house. And even my husband, who doesn't believe in any of this, told me I finally needed to find somebody who could explain this. I said, well, what do you mean things aren't right in your house? She said, well, he and I fight like cats and dogs. We've never fought. And it's over stupid stuff. Everybody is on edge, and there are just things going on that I can't really describe, but you know when things are going on and they shouldn't be. You can feel it, Denise. It's like I see it out of the corner of my eye. I can't really explain it, but I know it's there. We all know it's there. It wasn't there before that lady came and did all those readings. Well, I taught her about, how do you sage a house? How do you bless your house? And at the very least, invite the Archangel Saint Michael in to clear up any residue of all of the fear that people experienced from this person. She said, I'm never, ever, ever going to do that again. I should have found out more about who she was, shouldn't I, Denise? I said, yep. Kind of like going to a surgeon to have, I don't know, your gallbladder worked on and you end up having, I don't know, a leg removed because you really didn't check on the doctor. But you heard they were a pretty good doctor. She said, Denise, some of my friends are in real turmoil because of what she told them was going to happen, which was a whole other conversation. The bottom line is that she learned that you don't just invite somebody in who says they're a psychic to do psychic readings. And if you do that, and you see that your friends are being frightened, you can stop. You don't have to be polite. I think we're good now. I think we can stop this here party. I think it's time to do something different. Here's your hat. What's your hurry? It's okay to do that. It's okay to do that. But if that does happen, and it happens in many different ways, you can smudge, you can clear. You can see a therapist if you need to see a therapist after something like that. One of her friends did end up in therapy because of the seed that was planted that began to grow and create anxiety. So does the woman that came and did this work, is she off free and clear and easy? No. When we play with spiritual fire and knowingly, we know we're not prepared. We know we've not been properly trained. There are repercussions. For me, my pipe may go missing. My gifts may shut down. Karma is as it is. We don't always see how it's going to happen, but we always know that whatever we give out comes back. That's part of having integrity and being mindful. Yes. If you're going to say to somebody, I'm going to come over to your house and help clear out negative entities, please make sure that you're qualified to do that. Because often what happens is on the other side of the veil, they say, hey, look who showed up to clear us out of the house. Really? He thinks he's going to clear us out of this house? Huh? We're going to have a party up in here and we're going to invite all of our friends. They don't know what they're doing. And these are the things that I hear from my clients. What happens is that a house that was supposed to be cleared, right, becomes the frat house for unruly spirits on the other side who actually came to teach the person who thought they were prepared to clean that maybe they need a little more training in that, and came to teach perhaps the person who hired this person that maybe you need to do a little more investigating before you just bring somebody along because they say that they have a feather and a little bit of sage that they bought somewhere out west while they were in New Mexico. And they're pretty sure they know how to do it because, you know what? They spend a whole weekend in Taos, right? I spent a whole weekend on the reservation. Of course, I know how to do this. The unseen world, the seen world are equally as real. For me, the unseen world is more real. This is kind of a temporary existence that we're having. Tracy's laughing. You cannot believe well, you know Tracy because you hear it too. Yeah. I've heard of Jesus and I heard of Paul. Who are you? Yeah. Don't say what you don't know and don't be who you're not. That keeps you out of a lot of trouble. Be mindfully aware. Be consciously aware. Mindfully in your brain aware. Consciously in your spiritual body aware that we are always attracting. We are always attracting. What are we attracting? What are we inviting? What have we learned? What do we do now? Oh, I can't believe I just did that. We've all done that when we're learning. And Spirit does understand when we are just learning, by the way. There is a curve of responsibility. There is a curve of responsibility. Of course. Of course. I can't remember. Can't believe I remembered that. Some little teachings die hard, don't they, Rob? Absolutely. So with that, everyone, always remember about the power of your love. Right here. Power of your love. Right here. All in here. Power of your love. Always remember that. Let it always dictate how you play with Spirit and spiritual fires. Walk in the light. Leave walking into darkness to those who have chosen to walk in darkness. When darkness visits, shine your love, shine your light. If you need help, call on somebody who's qualified in the physical realm and somebody who is qualified in the non-physical realm. Do not underestimate the power of your own love light, however. That is not to say that you will not be tested. We all get tested. How do we know what we're capable of if we don't get tested? Of course we do. And we can look back and go, holy crap, you mean I did that? I made it through. I walked through that fire. I can't believe it. Wow. So it's not to say that we're just going to live an airy-fairy life just because we have declared that we are walking in the light. Oh no. For every degree of light that we wield, that same degree of darkness will come calling. That's from my friend Lori Bruno. When I said, does it ever get any easier, Lori? She laughed. She threw her head back. She laughed and she said, no, it never gets easier. Dana, she said, the degree to which you wield the light will always be matched by that same degree of darkness, so that you can learn once again how to increase your light and walk with increased light. Walk in the light, shine your love light. You're already doing that. Bravo. Not everyone does. Leave the darkness to the darkness. Walk in your light, shine your light, be the light. Hold the light at this time. With that, everyone, blessings be. Have a beautiful evening. And before you go to sleep tonight, call on your healing angels of light. Call upon your dream angels to lead you gently into the night and into the dreamscape. Good night, everyone. Until next week.